Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Mr. J's Geek Corner, place where we talk about anything and everything that is geek, whether it be TV, comics, movies, and video games. And starting this week in honor of the new Godzilla movie coming out this month on the 16th, we're doing a whole month of special shows, a whole month devoted to the King of the Monsters, Godzilla. And I've always been a big Godzilla fan. I mean, I always back in the '90s. I've always been a pretty big Godzilla fan, and I've just gotten to be more of a fan over the years. As the years have gone on, I've just become to be a bigger and bigger fan of Godzilla. It's my favorite movie monster, and I heard about this new movie coming out this year, and I just got super excited. I got super excited when I found out they were even going to make this. And every time they release a new trailer coming out, release a new trailer or a new TV spot comes out or on YouTube or something, it just makes me more excited. I mean, I cannot wait for this movie to come out. And so this month I've decided to devote this whole month of May to nothing but Godzilla shows. Kind of like what I did last year with June being Man of Steel, being all shows devoted to Superman. This month is going to be as a Superman month. This is going to be Godzilla month. And to start things off, I wanted to do a show where, as y'all know, Godzilla has in 60 years has faced a lot of foes on screen. There's a lot of big epic battles on screen, and I mean, there's some good ones, and then there was some bad ones, and of course there was the over the top campy ones that are still enjoyable. And today I wanted to name over some what I think are the best, some of Godzilla's greatest opponents from over the 60 years of 60 years that he's been on screen. And I said there were a lot of villains to go through, a lot of monsters to go through over the, and like I said, it was kind of hard, and it wasn't that hard at all. A lot of them, but this really wasn't that hard to compile. I think this list wasn't that hard to compile. I mean, I hope this is some of what y'all consider to be some of his greatest opponents that he has ever faced on screen. And to start off things, I wanted to with number five. Start off with number five is probably one that started off as in a movie of his own and got merged into that universe. He's never really fought. He's fought him on screen, but it's never really been a movie devoted just to them two in a fight. But he has fought him several times, and he's even allied with him a few times in the movie. And that is, I hope y'all can see it, Rodan. Rodan, and that's the classic version of Rodan right there from his first appearance in 1956 in his own self-titled movie. This is the version of Rodan and of course that Rodan turned into a campy. As a Rodan started off in his own movie, let's say what Godzilla did, and I think it was Godzilla. I think it was Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, that Rodan and Godzilla first faced off, and it's like they were instant foes. But eventually, they did team up to go against King Ghidorah. Or not King Ghidorah at that time, Ghidorah at that time. But I'll get into that more later. I said eventually they did become allies. They only fought for one movie. They never really fought. They only fought for one movie in the old Showa days of Godzilla. And the Showa era being from 1954 to 1975, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when that was known as the Showa era of Godzilla. For those who don't know, but like I said, they've been allies some over the years too. I mean, they fought, but they've also been allies from a lot of the time during the campy era of Godzilla, which is like the late '60s into the '70s, I guess. But like I said, they fought, they've been allies and everything. all throughout the show era. Then the what they call the Heisei era started, and they rebooted the Godzilla series, and that none of that ever happened. And starting in the 80s, they've made it where none of that ever happened, and that Godzilla returned and rose from the deep once again as a monster. Not a superhero that dances the jig and everything. A monster, straight out monster, which is what this new Godzilla is going to be, and the new one that's coming out this month. And and of course during that era, they brought Rodan back too, and this is what he looked like during that era. That's how I always know him as looking right there. If you can see it real good, that's the Heisei Rodan, and that Rodan did something that the other Rodan never could, and that was he had a beam, like an atomic blast beam, that he shot out of his mouth just like Godzilla. Because when they introduced him, he was in a nest. It was in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. They reintroduced Rodan. He reappeared. He appeared. They go to this island, and I don't know what happened. There's a Japanese version. I know the American version. They go to this island. They find they find like some fossils there and everything, and they find 2 eggs, perfectly preserved eggs. One that had done like it'd been hatched out, but there was another one there that hadn't really that was perfectly intact, hadn't hatched yet. And I'm not going to spoil most of the movie for this. Well, I'll tell a few highlights of it. They said it was like a parasite egg, and that it was laid there by something, and it was laid there by another being. And they found out later that, well, I say this because come to find out later, the one that hatched out that other egg and grew very rapidly was none other than Rodan. Of course, they call him Radon in the movie for some reason when they translate it, but it's Rodan. It is Rodan, and of course, he and Godzilla get into a fight after attacking the ones on the expedition, the scientists. Godzilla rises from the deep, and they get into a fight too. And then that whole thing they explained, they said it was a parasite egg. And they said it's like they're thinking that the Rodan egg was a like a parasite egg because like a cuckoo that they knock the egg out of a nest and then they lay their own in its place. Like they lay their egg in another nest, and then eventually the bird hatches and knocks the other eggs out of the nest. Which I know sounds bad, but that's the way things go. And that this works about the same way. And of course, Godzilla beats the ever-living snot out of him in their first fight. And eventually the egg hatches, and come to find out, weird enough, that the egg belongs and what hatched that egg is essentially another Godzilla, a baby version of Godzilla, which is, I think, is a pretty neat story. Part of the story that you have in the next generation. But for some reason, he and this Rodan have some sort of bond, and that it's like they sing this. There's a part of the movie where they sing this song, and the baby gets like an influx of energy or something like that, and somehow, way on that island, Rodan revives. And somehow gets such an influx of energy, he develops that breath, which they nicknamed him Fire Rodan, because he shoots, essentially, like I said, shoots fire from the mouth. I'm not going to reveal what happened in the rest of that movie because that would be spoiling it. But he does go to the rescue of that baby. But I'm not going to say what Rodan's fate was by the movie being in the movie. But I'll just say go see it. It's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. It's a really good movie. It's one of the best of the Heisei series. And if you want to see any of the other ones, I said go find them. I said some of Rodan's best appearances, they'd be one of the campier instances would probably be Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, where he teams up with Godzilla and Mothra to fight Ghidorah. And What's another one? Destroy All Monsters. That's another good. That's another good appearance. And I can't really think of any other ones. Any of the other ones right offhand right now. I imagine, but like I said, just like I said, those three I mentioned right there are really good movies. And I almost forgot to mention that in the Millennium series they brought him back again, which was kind of, I'm gonna say the Millennium series was kind of, it didn't really have a steady continuity to it. I mean, one movie to the other, except for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS, and they were both connected. And Final Wars was kind of connected to that, but it was almost loosely in its own universe too. But in Godzilla Final Wars, which was the last of the Millennium series, was essentially the last one of the Millennium series, and essentially the last one to be made up till now. They brought all the monsters back, including Rodan, and they brought Rodan back in a flashy fashion, and he just shows up in New York City and starts trashing the place. You actually get to see the full force of his sonic boom, the sonic booms he could generate because of how fast he flies, because of his massive size and speed. Flight speed, and you see what kind of sonic booms he could actually create in his wake. And I'm gonna say that's one of the even more campier versions of Rodan. I mean, the design was awesome. I mean, he almost looks more bird-like than pterodactyl-like. He almost looks like a bird, cross between a bird and a pterodactyl. He looks more bird-like. And he was a good design. Matter of fact, I've actually sketched it myself from the concept drawing. But it's just, that being one of the campier installments of Godzilla, it was kind of campy. One of his campier appearances. I mean, that's like I'm gonna say that movie was like a love letter to Godzilla from all the generations, all the way up to that one, all the way up to Millennium, from Showa through to the Millennium version. Hey, if there was any way to call it a 50th anniversary movie, that was it. But I didn't particularly like all the camp, but, well, it wasn't too over the top like I've seen some of them be. But like I said, he's appeared in at least in every iteration, every generation of Godzilla that they've ever done, every era of Godzilla they've ever done. And I don't know what this era is going to be, but no doubt Rodan's going to end up factoring in that somehow, some way. But like I said, he was one of the better. I would love one of these days to see him go toe to toe with Godzilla in their own movie together, without any of the monsters interfering in it. I would love to see it, because I think it'd be very interesting. I mean, there's just something appealing about seeing two dinosaurian creatures duke it out like that. I mean, it's awesome. And I would love to see them together, and that's why he made it number 5 on my list of the greatest Godzilla foes. And number 4 on my list is probably one of his greatest foes from the Heisei era. The last one, actually, of the Heisei era. Destroyer. You can see that there. Destroyer, however you iterate it. In Japanese, it's Destroyer. Destroyer, to me, is one of the most awesome monsters there is. I mean, this was almost Godzilla's Doomsday. I mean, that's the only way I can equivocate him to. He was like He was like Doomsday to Godzilla. I mean, and of course the movie Godzilla vs. Destroyer, where he was in the one and only time he's ever been shown in the Godzilla universe. I know I said earlier about Final Wars, they brought him back. All except for the Heisei monsters. They didn't bring the monsters that they just introduced during the Heisei era, like Space Godzilla or him in there. They didn't introduce him. Them two, they didn't, or Biollante, they didn't bring them back. They brought back his action figures, but not as actually the monsters in the movie. They fit in there somewhere. But Destroyer, he started off as like a almost like a microscopic crustacean. But like he looked, the way they showed the design for him on the screen, he looked about like a little bitty microscopic version of a horseshoe crab. They said they were just like harmless creatures. And then they said that it stems back to when Godzilla, they first used the oxygen destroyer in 1954 against Godzilla, that they were hit by it. And all these years they've been changing and mutating, and they've been changing and mutating and everything for 40 years up to that point. They've been changing and mutating until finally they turned into something that's ravenous. They essentially made it look like the water was eating up the fish. Because first place it looked like they attacked. First they caused an elevator shaft to melt in a lab, and they bring a sample of dirt back from the lab. Well, first they found a sample of dirt that had a sign of life in it. Then it ate its way out of the test tube and caused the elevator shafts to melt. And then it got into the water supply and got into the aquarium and proceeded to eat up the fish and leave nothing but bones behind, about like the original oxygen destroyer did. And come to find out, that's what had happened. They were mutated by the oxygen destroyer, and they just started getting more and more ravenous and everything. And eventually, in the movie, after they found a way to destroy them, they got into the movie. Have one more in the movie. They go in there and they all of a sudden they grown to the size, a little bit bigger than a human being, a grown man. I mean, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then by the time they get the army in, they bring in like special forces and the police and everything in to stop them. And like I said, they find out that the disturbances are these creatures. Like I said, they've grown about the size of a grown man, maybe bigger, and I'm gonna say definitely bigger. And they take on the appearance of a creature that looks about like a cross between an alien and a predator. I mean, it reminds you of a xenomorph, almost a queen alien with the big crest and everything. But they got the mandibles of a and the inner mouth of a queen alien, but with the mandibles of a predator, like when they open up and everything. They look about like that, and they have like I said, they look like that. And to me, that's a very creative design. I mean, it makes for a very fearsome look. And then later on, the army goes out to try to stop them with a new freezer weapon, and they've grown bigger. And then as they try to stop them with the new freezer weapons, they then proceed to combine into one giant creature. One gigantic city-size, one gigantic building-size version of one of those of those creatures. They're all combined together into that. And then it proceeds to change into a flying form, which looks creepy. It looks pretty mean, pretty bad and ravenous looking. And it proceeds to get in a fight and get beaten by Godzilla Jr., who at that point had finally matured to where he looked like a miniature Godzilla, looked like a younger Godzilla, smaller Godzilla. Then later in the movie, Destroyer mutates into his final form, which is what I just showed you there I just showed you in that photo there. This right here, this is Destroyer's final form. This is his final form right here. That is pretty bad. That is pretty frightening if I do say so myself. I mean, and he ends up going toe to toe with a now supercharged, superpowered Godzilla, who is at that point threatening to destroy the world with his overabundance of radiation. He's about to explode because of energy overload. Then they bring that under control, and then his heart starts breaking up, and he's threatening the world with a massive meltdown, which will destroy the planet also. But without revealing too much, it's a pretty good fight. It's a right good fight, one of the best. I mean, you see Godzilla at his most powerful in that movie. And I'm not going to reveal the rest of what happens because it just spoils too much if you haven't already seen it. Go see it. Godzilla vs. Destroyer. I said it's a great movie, and to me that's why he deserves to be on the list of. He's number 4 on my list of Godzilla's greatest foes, and number 3 on my list is Mechagodzilla. And there have been 3 different iterations of Mechagodzilla. And that's the original classic version. That's the original version of Mechagodzilla. And that version that I just showed you was built by space aliens. And it first appeared in the movie Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. And would then go on to appear in Terror of Mechagodzilla. It started off, everybody thought it was the real Godzilla. He emerged mysteriously. They start off with this prophecy claiming that there will be a monster that would rise and try to destroy the world, and all of a sudden Godzilla just rises from Mount Fuji for some unknown reason, and he starts ransacking everything. But you notice right away in the movie that he isn't exactly acting right, because at that point Godzilla had been the superhero. At that point he's gone back acting like Godzilla used to act. But you notice a few things ain't quite right with him. Like whenever he walks, it sounds like he's clanking, and instead of roaring, he hisses. It sounds like he has almost like a mechanical hiss. And then later on, he gets into a fight. He runs into Anguirus, who had been another one is like an ankylosaur. Those don't know. He's like a giant ankylosaur, about like with Rodan being a giant pterodactyl. He's like a giant ankylosaur, kind of a species of ankylosaur that mutated like Godzilla. It was hit with the same H-bomb and turned into that. And he pops out. He comes out from under the ground and notices this was supposed to be Godzilla there and attacks him. And somebody going down the road seeing the fight saying he shouldn't attack Godzilla, he's his ally. And then finally he nicks him in the shoulder one good time, and you see something silver metallic on the shoulder, and he's like, something's up. And he pretty much beats down Anguirus pretty good. And then later on you see him in Tokyo, I guess it's Tokyo, destroying, just laying waste. It looks like a oil refinery or something. And another little distinction that this can't be the real Godzilla, he's spewing fire-colored breath from his mouth, and it also sounds like a laser. And then come to find out after it gets in the fight with, and then the real Godzilla shows up out of nowhere. So and it's like, okay, what is this? And then eventually in the course of the fight, another chunk of his skin gets knocked off, and you see more metal. And then the ones really running this Godzilla, you suddenly see them sitting in their little hideout, and he hits a button, and it burns the skin off, and it's this robot Godzilla, armed to the teeth, with hand missiles, toe missiles, guns in his knees, lasers in his eyes, guns in his mouth, laser in his belly, just armed to the teeth. And you really see that later on in the movie when they teams up with another monster. And I say, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But either way, it's a pretty good, it's a right good movie. It's a good first appearance for him. And kind of find out that this Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, is built by a space alien. And what type of space aliens? They look like regular Japanese men. But I'm not going to tell you what they really are. Just go see it for yourself. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and also Terror of Mechagodzilla is the next time he appears in the movie. He does get he gets 2 appearances, and then in the Heisei era they decide to go back and do a remake of it, and which winds up being Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, and with Godzilla bigger and more muscular as he is, they changed Mechagodzilla to look like that too. And that's what he winds up looking like. You can see that real good. To me, this is my favorite design of all of them, and he's pretty much armed to the teeth himself. He's got laser beam. He's got lasers in his eyes. He's got they call it a Mega Buster, but it's essentially equivalent to his Godzilla's atomic breath. He's got shoulder missiles. He's got harpoon. He's got harpoon cannons in his arms. I mean, and he's got a plasma cannon in his stomach, which is a pretty bad weapon. It's pretty nasty weapon, especially at close range. And it soaks up Godzilla's energy and reflects it out as a plasma charge, and it's awesome. I mean, to me, that's my favorite version. And sometime later on in the movie, he actually connects with this starship looking thing here called Garuda, and becomes Super Mecha Godzilla. And he gets these big, massive shoulder cannons to go along with his already impressive arsenal to use against Godzilla. And as it pretty much he pretty much takes care of business, and and I'm gonna say it actually puts Godzilla down for the count there for a little bit. But that's all I'm gonna say. I said just go see, if you haven't already seen the movie, go see the movie. It's awesome. It's Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. In case you missed that. It's just awesome. I mean, it's one of the best of the Heisei series. And then in the Millennium series, they brought him back yet again. And this was his look here for Mechagodzilla 3, as he's been on it. Or Kyu, Mechagodzilla 3, whatever you want to call him. This is what he originally looked like. He was armed with back, basically that thing you saw in his back was all missiles. He had the rocket launchers here. He had missiles in his back. He had a laser in his. He had wrist lasers, and he had wrist lasers. He had a wrist blade, and in his chest he had something they called the Absolute Zero gun, where it would shoot a beam of absolute zero. It was at absolute zero. It would freeze stuff to the point where it would disintegrate. And to me, that's pretty impressive weaponry. And how he differs from the other Mechagodzillas, in that he ain't just fully machine. He is essentially a cyborg. He's in essence a cyborg, in that inside of him they use the original 1954 Godzilla's skeleton to construct him. It's actually used something called a DNA computer, and it's basically, might as well say, it's like a cyborg. And during the first confrontation with Godzilla, this thing actually, when Godzilla roars, it actually has a genetic response. It's almost like it has the genetic memories of the original Godzilla's of the original Godzilla from the 54, and all of a sudden out of nowhere he just stops working. I mean, it's remote controlled and everything. It's not piloted from the inside, though it can be, as you find out later on in the movie. But it's mainly remote control from a remote airplane, from a fighter jet nearby. It looks like a prototype that the U.S. never used. When they took the F-22. That it looks like a prototype that the U.S. had when they were trying out the F-22 Raptor, but and they wound up rejecting it for the Raptor. But I say it's basically just this futuristic looking fighter jets that they used to remote, and one in particular remote controlled the Mechagodzilla. And it and like I said, and when Godzilla roared, and it had a maser, and they call it maser. It had a laser in its mouth. It was like a laser breath type thing, and that was pretty cool. And it actually, as I said, when Godzilla roared, it's like all of a sudden it engaged a flashback memory in its head of what the DNA source was, which was the original Godzilla, and all of a sudden it quit working, and then Godzilla was able to escape during that time. And when they go in closer for a closer look, the thing suddenly swings around and shoots at him. It swings around and shoots at him, and come to find out, the thing starts acting like Godzilla, the original Godzilla, and it starts acting like original Godzilla and goes haywire and starts trashing the city and everything. And then eventually they work out that kink in it, and they work out that bug, and he goes back to working like he usually does. But I said that's a pretty, like I said, without revealing too much more of the movie, I said it's a pretty much it's a bad piece of machinery, and I'm gonna say it gets some pretty bad battle damage in it, to the point where in the next movie, Godzilla versus and Godzilla Tokyo SOS, which includes Mothra in it, they actually have to repair the Absolute Zero gun gets destroyed, and its left and right arm gets destroyed, and they have to essentially replace it with an arm the hand can turn into a drill, and it has like a big gigantic version of the laser that it has in its mouth installed into its chest now in that movie, and got new rocket packs too, because the other one gets destroyed. But like I said, without revealing too much of how it all happens, like I said, they're both really good movies. Like I said, Mechagodzilla all the way around is a bad piece of machinery, whether it's built by evil space aliens trying to take over the world, or the special forces that are assigned specifically to deter Godzilla, to basically, like I said, deter in his attacks and defend Japan. Either way, he's a bad piece of machinery. As a matter of fact, it actually is, and that's why he's number 3 on my list. And the second Mechagodzilla has a connection to the next monster on my list as his greatest foe, and that is this one right here, King Ghidorah. Not Ghidorah, King Ghidorah. The 90s version of Ghidorah, because there have been I'm gonna say 4 distinct iterations of Ghidorah, and that being the first iteration was from the Showa era, the space monster known as Ghidorah, sometimes referred to as King Ghidorah, or Ghidra sometimes, and sometimes Ghidra, is essentially like a big golden dragon, as you saw there. Is essentially like a space monster that annihilated, depending on which version you hear, an entire population of Venus or Mars. Depends on which version you're watching. Either way, it's a pretty bad space monster that just annihilates whole civilizations and has found its way to Earth. To me, that version of Ghidorah is like the Lex Luthor of the Godzilla universe. I mean, they just used him to death. I mean, well, like with Mothra, I'm gonna say they used him to death. I mean, ever since they introduced him in excuse me, I'm stepping on something on the floor. They used him, and when they first introduced him in 1964, I think it was, in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, they took every opportunity they could to introduce him or to use him or mention him, because they mentioned him in, like, he was in Destroy All Monsters. He was in Destroy All Monsters. He was in Destroy All Monsters. He was in Godzilla vs. Gigan, also known as Godzilla on Monster Island. He was in Terror. Mentioned in Terror of Mechagodzilla. He was mentioned by name. In that movie, he was known as King Ghidorah. I don't know where the king came from, but he was Ghidorah the whole time. He was never king in that. But I said they just used him a lot in that. And they really started making him look bad when he had hair to him, because he almost looked like an old man a little bit. But I said, I never really liked that version. He never was really impressive. I mean, he was impressive looking, but when they started adding hair and compile on top of it with the call that he made, the noise that he made, it really wasn't impressing me. But when they reintroduced him in the 90s, the version I showed you there, as you hear, and this version here, you can see why he's impressed. Why this version made it onto my list, because the original, I said, because like in this version, when they reintroduced him in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, this time of King Ghidorah, he was essentially he was three basically harmless creatures, genetically created creature called Dorad. These people came from the future claiming that Godzilla was going to destroy Japan and leave it uninhabitable. He's going to destroy the Japanese race and just leave it in desolation. And to do that, and then they duped them into going into the past. Excuse me. They duped them into going into the past, and back to '54, when Godzilla was created, to uncreate him, to make sure that the bomb never hits him and he never becomes Godzilla. And while doing that, they leave the three Dorak creatures behind that look like they're about the equivalent of kitty cats. They're about the equivalent of cats. I mean, they look kind of dragon-like, but they look cute and harmless and everything. But they leave them behind to get hit by the nuclear bomb, by the H bomb that should have hit Godzilla. And when they come back to the present, King Ghidorah is there waiting for them. King Ghidorah is there destroying Kyushu. He shows up looking like the big three-headed golden dragon we all know, but this time he's more impressive looking. He's even more impressive looking, no hair, and his roar sounds like something very scary and intimidating. And of course, Godzilla does return and deals with him, and basically just channels him to a fight. The reason I say Mechagodzilla is connected to him is that later on there is a Mecha King Ghidorah in the movie, and that they go into the future and basically salvage what's left. Essentially, go into the future and bring King Ghidorah into the present, rebuilt as a cyborg, a genuine cyborg creature. And Mecha King Ghidorah, and basically and the reason I say it is that they took what was left of Mecha King Ghidorah and made him into Mechagodzilla. Made him into the Heisei Mechagodzilla. So they just studied that technology and built their own robot based on that technology. So, but I hate I don't have a picture of Mecha King Ghidorah because he's pretty impressive too. But I said, to me, that's, and of course, for me, that's my favorite version of King Ghidorah. And of course, there are two other versions of King Ghidorah, and that is the King Ghidorah from Godzilla Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monster All Attack. Well, wait a minute, I'm mistaken. There are other versions of King Ghidorah that are not featured in Godzilla movies, and that is like, I think it's like Grand King Ghidorah. And there's like several versions of several King Ghidorahs that are featured in Mothra movies, like Rebirth of Mothra 1, 2, 3. Ones like that. It's like I don't know how that version of King Ghidorah came about, but there are other versions of King Ghidorah that look just as intimidating as the Heisei Godzilla version. But the only versions I'm talking, I said there are other versions, but I said the main one I'm focusing on is just the four that are in the Godzilla movies, because I said I don't know much about the Mothra King Ghidorahs, but that's why I'm mainly focused on the Godzilla version. But in Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah, there is a King Ghidorah in that is not a space monster, nor does it have anything to do with anything science fiction. It's not a space monster, and it's not a it looks and sounds a lot like the original one, and it looks and sounds a lot like the original version that is the space monster from the Showa era. But I said it looks better, no hair. But I said it's not a space monster, and it's not a It's not a product of genetic engineering and radioactivity. This monster is this King Ghidorah. The King Ghidorah from that version is like a mystical dragon. It's like a mystical golden dragon that is like a protector of Japan. It's supposed to be like a guardian of Japan. What is it? There's like three. And like I said, in the Millennium Godzilla movies, there was no real continuity. It would go back and forth all over the place. I mean, you had after two movies where they had original creations. In this movie, they kind of deviate into the realm of mythical stuff. Like I said, even Godzilla in that one's supposed to represent like souls that have died at sea, restless souls at sea. I mean, he even looks unearthly. I mean, he's like huge, bulky looking, more Tyrannosaurus-like than usual, and with no pupils in his eyes. Yeah, pupilless eyes. I say he looked creepy. He looked like something undead. He looked like y'all be a Black Lantern, to tell you the truth. But they reintroduced Baragon, which was like more of the Showa era. He wasn't really shown that much. Mothra, which was not the Infant Island Mothra that everybody knows, and it's more like just one of those guardian creatures. But and King Ghidorah, which was King Ghidorah was supposed to be like the they called the 1,000-year-old dragon, and that's what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be like a guardian of Japan. And I said, while he looks impressive, I mean, I've got the figure right here of him. This is the version. This is what I'm talking about. This is what he looked like. He looks like the old Showa era version, but with no hair. But I think it looks like the head's maybe a little bit smaller. But essentially, this is the version that appeared in Giant Monster All Out Attack. And like I said, I like the appearance of him, but I didn't really like him all that well, as the Heisei era King Ghidorah, and also in the Millennium era and Final Wars, they actually sneaked the original King Ghidorah in there too, in that whole scene with the action figures and everything. But they snuck Ghidorah in there in that movie too, in that the monster, ultimately the Monster X that shows up on Earth to fight Godzilla, that knows all the ninja skills and knows how to fight like a human being and everything. He eventually mutates into his alternate form, Kaiser Ghidorah, which looks like some creepy. I mean, he's got like 4 legs, and he just his wings are too little to even support flight. But he's like more unified. The heads work more in like they're one mind. They don't work like individual heads, like shooting lightning where they shoot together. I mean, they're more like one 3 heads, one being, one mind is what they act like. And to me, he's pretty intimidating because he kind of lays Godzilla out. But to me, that ain't one of my favorites. But overall, my favorite and the one that made it number 2 on my list is the Heisei era King Ghidorah from the 90s. I mean, I love that version. It's probably most beloved version amongst fans, probably. I know it is to me anyway, but I imagine it's the most well remembered. I mean, it's the one that makes the most lists. And when it talks about Godzilla movies and everything. And like I said, that's why it made him. To me, he should have got more time in the Heisei universe because I like that version. And to me, he's number 2 on my list. Cause I say he's just the best version of that character. And lastly, it leads us to number 1 on the list of, I think, the best Godzilla opponents. And to me, this one I think deserves a lot more love and respect than he got, because to me, he's even more powerful than King Ghidorah, than Mothra, than any other foe he's ever faced. And that's Space Godzilla. You can see it right there, and you see it on my shirt too, the movie poster shirt for Space Godzilla. Here. That was from the comics. This is from the actual movie, Space Godzilla. To me, he should have got a lot more respect than he got. I mean, it's just, to me, he is my number one favorite Godzilla monster ever. Of any other one that's been made. It's even more my favorite than Godzilla is. In case you don't know the origin of Godzilla, of Space Godzilla, in a previous movie, the essence, it was a movie. It was a monster called Biollante. It has conflicting origins, and that they claim that maybe off of Biollante, or I said somehow or some other means, Godzilla's DNA got into the universe and got sucked into a black hole, and they said out a white hole. They said it was exposed to energy from explosions of stars, and it turned them into this, which to me is not a good origin. I don't know what the original Japanese version said, but it's got to be better than what the American version, the American dub said it was. But in the toy line, Godzilla Wars, they actually explained that the essence of Biollante was in space and went into space, and I'm not going to go into that because that's just going to spoil the movie. That'll just spoil how it got there. I ain't going to go into that because it's just going to spoil Godzilla vs. Biollante. Go see it. But somehow its essence merged with a crystalline life form, and it turned into this evil, twisted mutant version of Godzilla. And like I said, and to me, he's the most impressive opponent because he can do things that, well, a lot of other versions. He could do a lot of things that not a lot of other monsters could do. He had opponents that could fly, like Kamakarus and King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra. They could all fly. He could fly through space. Gigan probably could do the same thing, and same with the old Ghidorah. This one could fly through space. It's the only Godzilla-like creature I've ever seen can fly through space. And to me, and he could grow energy crystals that would boost his powers. And his sole purpose in mind is to kill Godzilla, to destroy him. And I said and in the game you explore so many of them those powers. Particularly in Godzilla Save the Earth. You get to he has telekinesis. Other than the lightning breath he shoots from his mouth, he has telekinesis. In the game, you can swing like that and deliver a telekinetic uppercut to your opponent clear across the screen. And they actually display a little bit of that in the movie, in that he lifts up Godzilla with his mind. He don't even touch him. He just lifts him up with his mind and throws him into a building. Their first battle, he pretty much kicked him down to the ground. He pretty much whops Godzilla in their first meeting. He's just too strong and powerful for him. He imprisoned his Junior in a crystal chamber and just flies off into the sky like he's the biggest, baddest, like he's the new rooster on the farm or something. He's the new Godzilla in town. And I said he just builds these crystals, and like I said, he just makes them like a crystal fortress in the middle of Fukuoka, which is, like I said, in Japan. It's somewhere in Japan. I don't know where. I say if he goes to like that particular Japanese city and sets up a crystal fortress and just waits for Godzilla. He doesn't go on a rampage. He just waits there for Godzilla to show up so he can kill him. He just waits there so Godzilla can kill him. And of course, they wind up sending a robot, Mogera, in there, and he pretty much doesn't stand a chance. But if Godzilla shows up, I said he pretty much gives Godzilla pretty good trouncing. He he doesn't beat him, but he almost beats him. I mean, he beat him up. I mean, he gave him a pretty good beating. I said Space Godzilla, I think, is probably his most powerful opponent. Excuse me. I said I think it's the most powerful opponent that he's ever faced, and to me, I would try to have Space Godzilla return and another one. I mean, they said at the end of the movie, he said how much Godzilla's DNA has polluted the universe. They said we could end up with another Space Godzilla. I mean, that could be that pretty good setup for a sequel right there, for a future sequel of Space Godzilla Returns or something like that. I mean, they could make it, shoot, with this new movie series, if they wanted to, they could bring Space Godzilla into it. Like I said, to me, Space Godzilla is, they always call King Ghidorah his greatest foe. To me, Space Godzilla is his greatest foe. I mean, there you got a twisted, evil, mutant mirror image of Godzilla himself. He has more of his powers. He has his own abilities. He has his own powers and more. I mean, to me, he's like almost like if the Sith had a monster, he'd be it, because he essentially almost has like force powers. If you look at it, I mean, he's kind of bulky and moves around kind of slow, but with his mental abilities, why would you need to? Why would you need to move around so fast on your feet? I mean, he actually showed in the movie him levitating and shooting beam at him. Shooting lightning at him. He could levitate and fly. And move around pretty fast with his telekinesis and use telekinesis. Why would you need to move fast on your feet if you can... why do you need to move that fast on your feet and move around? I mean, it's a good compensation. But anyway, I said, with all his power and all his strength, to me, that's why Space Godzilla, I think, is Godzilla's greatest opponent ever. But what do y'all think? Am I wrong? Is there one I missed? Who do y'all think is the Godzilla's greatest opponent ever? Let me know. As always, drop a comment box. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say. And that's all for this edition of Mr. J's Geek Corner. Next episode, we're going to be, this time we discuss some of the best Godzilla opponents ever. Next week, going to be some of the worst Godzilla opponents ever. And I hope y'all join us then. And till then, you got a comment about the show, drop me a comment in the comment box. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. And if you have any ideas about anything you want to hear me talk about on the show, drop me a comment in the comment box. I'm always open for fresh new ideas. I'm always looking for new things to talk about on the show. I said, drop me a comment. I would love to hear. I would really, really love to hear your ideas and love to hear your thoughts. And you never know when it may be made into a future episode of Mr. J's Geek Corner. So I said, send me your ideas. I would love to hear them. And I'll see y'all next time.